What's up, everyone, and welcome to this week's Cybersecurity Weekly, where we review the security events that happened in the last week. As always, I have broken the stories down in the timeline, and there's a list of stories with time markers in the description below, so you can click around to any of these time markers to jump around to the story that you want to watch. If you find my work valuable, of course, I ask you to hit the like button and share this episode with anyone you know who can benefit from this information. And lastly, if you've not already, please consider subscribing to my channel.
Oh, drat these computers. They're so naughty and so complex. I could pinch them.
We start off today with phishing. RE Security Incorporated USA, a Los Angeles-based cybersecurity company providing managed threat detection and response for Fortune 500 companies, identified threat actors leveraging Open Redirect Vulnerabilities popular in online services and apps to bypass spam filters to ultimately deliver phishing content. Using highly trusted service domains like Snapchat and other services, hint Amex, they create special URLs which lead to malicious resources with phishing kits. The kit identified is named LogoKit, which was previously used in attacks against the customers of Office 365, Bank of America, GoDaddy, Virgin Fly, and many other major financial institutions and online services internationally. The spike of LogoKit was or has been identified around the beginning of August, when multiple new domain names impersonating popular services had been registered and leveraged together with open redirects. While LogoKit is known for a while, or has been known for a while, in the underground, at least since 2015, the cybercrime group behind it is constantly leveraging new tactics. LogoKit is known for its content generation using JavaScript. It is able to change logos of the impersonated service and text on the landing pages in real time to adapt on the fly. By doing so, the targeted victims are more likely to interact with malicious resources. Around November 2021, there were over 700 identified domain names used in campaigns leveraging LogoKit. The number is constantly growing. Notably, the actors prefer to use domain names in exotic jurisdictions or zones with relatively poor abuse management process like .gq, .ml, .tk, .ga, .cf, or to gain unauthorized access to legitimate web resources and then use them as hosting for further phishing distribution. These tactics allow cybercriminals to masquerade their activity behind the notifications of legitimate service to evade detection, thus tricking the victim into accessing the malicious resource. Unfortunately, the use of Open Redirect Vulnerability significantly facilitates LogoKit distribution, as many, even popular online services, don't treat such bugs as critical, and in some cases, don't even patch them, leaving the open door for such abuse. We now move on to patches. Cisco addressed a high-severity vulnerability in its adaptive security appliance and firepower threat defense software. The flaw, tracked to CVE 2022-20866, impacts the handling of RSA keys on devices running Cisco ASA software and FTD software. An unauthenticated remote attacker can trigger it to retrieve an RSA private key. Once the key is obtained, the attackers can impersonate a device that is running ASA FTD software or to decrypt the device traffic. This vulnerability is due to a logic error when the RSA key is stored in memory on a hardware platform that performs hardware-based cryptography. An attacker could exploit this vulnerability by using a Lenstra side channel attack against the targeted device. A successful exploit could allow the attacker to retrieve the RSA private key, reads the advisory published by the IT giant. The advisory states that the following conditions may be observed on an effective device. May be observed. Now, this issue will impact approximately 5% of the RSA keys on a device that is running a vulnerable release of ASA software or FTD software. Not all RSA keys are expected to be affected due to mathematical calculations applied to the RSA key. Number 2, the RSA key could be valid but have specific characteristics that make it vulnerable to the potential leak of the RSA private key. Number 3, the RSA key could be malformed and invalid. A malformed RSA key is not functional, and a TLS client connection to a device that is running Cisco ASA software or Cisco FTD software that uses the malformed RSA key will result in a TLS signature failure, which means a vulnerable software release created an invalid RSA signature that failed verification. If an attacker obtains the RSA private key, they can use the key to impersonate a device that is running Cisco ASA software or Cisco FTD software, or to decrypt the device traffic. We now move on to attacks, vulnerabilities, and updates, the real good stuff. BazarCall attack, aka callback phishing, is an attack vector that utilizes targeted phishing methodology and was first used by the Ryuk ransomware gang in 2020 and 2021. The BazarCall attack chain is composed of the following stages. Stage 1. Attackers send a mail to the victims that notify them that they are subscribed to a service for which payment is automatic. The email includes a phone number to call to cancel the subscription. Step number 2, or stage 2. The victim is tricked into contacting a special call center. When operators receive a call, they use a variety of social engineering tactics to convince victims to give remote desktop control to help them cancel their subscription service. Stage number 3. Once the victim's desktop is accessed, the attacker silently extends a foothold in the user's network, weaponizing legitimate tools that are known to be in Conti's arsenal. The initial operator remains on the line with the victim, pretending to assist them with the remote desktop access by continuing to utilize social engineering tactics. Stage number 4, the initiated malware session yields the advisory access as an initial point of entry into the victim's network. The researchers at cybersecurity firm Adbimtel state that currently at least 3 autonomous threat groups are adopting the independently developing their own targeted phishing tactics derived from the callback phishing methodology. The 3 groups are tracked as Silent Ransom, Quantum, and Roy Xeon. They emerged after the Conti gang opted to shut down its operation in May 2022. In March 2022, formed members of the Conti, who were experts in callback phishing attacks, created Silent Ransom when it became an autonomous group. Silent Ransom's previous bosses, tracked as Conti Team 2, who were the main Conti subdivision, rebranded as Quantum and launched their own version of callback phishing campaigns. On June 13, 2022, Advintel researchers uncovered a massive operation called Jormungandr. Okay, so it's Advintel, not Abdvintel, whatever it was. The third iteration of the BazarCall group was observed in late June 2022 and goes by the name of Roy Xeon. The group is composed of old guard members of Conti's Team 1, which created the Ryuk operation. This group has the advanced social engineering capabilities of the 3 groups. It involved large investments into hiring spammers, OSINT specialists, designers, call center operators, and expanding the number of network intruders. As a highly skilled and most likely government-affiliated group, Quantum was able to purchase exclusive email datasets and manually parse them to identify relevant employees at high-profile companies. The adoption of callback phishing campaigns has impacted the strategy of ransomware gangs. Experts observed targeted attacks aimed at finance, technology, legal, and insurance industries. The industries are considered privileged targets in almost all internal manuals, which were shared between ex-Conti members. Cisco disclosed a security breach. The Yanluowang ransomware group breached its corporate network in late May and stole internal data. The investigation conducted by Cisco Security Incident Response, or CSIRT, and Cisco Talos revealed that threat actors compromised the Cisco employees' credentials after they gained control of a personal Google account where credentials were saved in the victim's browser and were being synchronized. Once the credentials are obtained, the attackers launched voice phishing attacks in an attempt to trick the victim into accepting the multi-factor authentication push notification started by the attacker. Upon achieving a multi-factor authentication push acceptance, the attacker had access to the VPN in the context of the targeted user. The attacker conducted a series of sophisticated voice phishing attacks under the guise of various trusted organizations attempting to convince the victim to accept multi-factor authentication push notifications initiated by the attacker. The attacker ultimately succeeded in achieving an MFA push acceptance, granting them access to VPN in the context of the targeted user. According to Talos, once the attacker had obtained the initial access, they enrolled a series of new devices for multi-factor authentication and authenticated successfully to the Cisco VPN. Then, the threat actors escalated to administrative privileges before logging into multiple systems. The attackers were able to drop multiple tools in the target network, including remote access tools like LogMeIn and TeamViewer, Cobalt Strike, PowerSploit, Mimikatz, and Impacket. We confirm that the only successful data exfiltration that occurred during the attack included the contents of a box folder that was associated with a compromised employee's account. The data obtained by the advisory in this case was not sensitive, continues the analysis. Cisco said that the Yanluowang gang did not deploy any ransomware on its network during the attack. The Yanluowang ransomware group is attempting to extort the company and published a list of files stolen from the company, threatening to leak all stolen data if Cisco will not pay the ransom. The content delivery network and DDoS mitigation company Cloudflare revealed this week that at least 76 employees and their family members received text messages on their personal and work phones. According to the company, the attack is very similar to the one that recently targeted the communications company Twilio. Yesterday, August 8th, 2022, Twilio shared that they'd been compromised by a targeted phishing attack around the same time as Twilio was attacked. We saw an attack with very similar characteristics also targeting Cloudflare's employees, reads the announcement published by Cloudflare. While individual employees did fall for the phishing messages, we were able to thwart the attack through our own use of Cloudflare One products and physical security keys issued to every employee that are required to access our applications. Cloudflare pointed out that its systems were not compromised. It also added that its Cloud Force One threat intelligence team was able to perform additional analysis of the attack. On July 20th, 2022, the company received reports of employees receiving text messages containing links to what appeared to be a Cloudflare Okta login page. The company uses Okta as its identity provider, and messages include a link to a phishing page that was designed to look identical to a legitimate Okta login page. The attackers sent the messages to at least 76 employees in less than 1 minute, but the company's security team was not able to determine how the threat actors obtained the list of employees' phone numbers. They came from 4 phone numbers associated with T-Mobile issued SIM cards. They pointed to an official-looking domain, cloudflare-okta.com, continues report. That domain had been registered via Porkbun, a domain registrar, blah, 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 less than 40 minutes before the phishing campaign began. Once the recipient of the message has provided his credentials through the phishing page, the credentials were immediately sent to the attacker via the messaging service. Telegram expert states that the real-time relay was crucial for the attackers because the phishing page would also prompt for a time-based one-time password code. Once the info is obtained, the attackers can access the victim company's actual login page. According to Cloudflare, only 3 employees fell for the phishing message and entered their credentials. However, the company does not use TOTP codes. Instead, its employees use a FIDO2 compliant security YubiKey key. This means that without the hardware key, attackers can't access the company's systems, even knowing the credentials. We confirm that none of our team members got to this step. If they had, however, our endpoint security would have stopped the installation of the remote access software, concludes Cloudflare. VMware warns its customers of the availability of a proof-of-concept exploit code for a critical authentication bypass flaw, tracked as CVE 2022-31656, in multiple products. The flaw was discovered by security researcher Petras Vietfun VNG Security, who today released the proof-of-concept exploit code for the flaws and provided technical details about the flaw. Last week, the virtualization giant addressed the CVE 2022-31656 flaw, which impacts local domain users in multiple products. An unauthenticated attacker can exploit the vulnerability to gain admin privileges. A malicious actor with remote access to the UI may be able to obtain administrative access without the need to authenticate, reads the advisory published by the virtualization giant. The flaw affects Workspace ONE Access, Identity Manager, and vRealize automation products. The vulnerability has been rated as critical and received a CVSS version 3 base score of 9.8. Today, VMware reported the availability of proof-of-concept exploits for the CVE 2022-31656 and CVE 2022-31659. The good news is that the vendor is not aware of attacks exploiting the vulnerabilities in attacks in the wild. In January 2022, researchers at Kaspersky ICS CERT uncovered a series of targeted attacks on military, industrial enterprises, and public institutions in Afghanistan and East Europe. The attackers breached dozens of enterprises and in some cases compromised their IT infrastructure, taking over systems used to manage security solutions. All the victims identified are associated with the defense industry or are public institutions. The attack targeted industrial plants, design bureaus, and research institutes, government agencies, ministries, and departments in several East European countries, Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine, as well as Afghanistan, repeats a report published by Kaspersky. The threat actors launched spear phishing campaigns against the victims. In some cases, the messages contained information related to the victims which were not publicly available. This suggests that the attacks had a deep knowledge of the targets, likely resulting from detailed preparatory work. The CVE 2017-11882 flaw is a memory corruption issue that affects all versions of Microsoft Office released between 2000 and 2017. The vulnerability affects the MS Office component EQNEDT32.exe, which is responsible for the insertion and editing of equations, OLE objects, in documents. The component fails to properly handle objects in the memory, a bug that could be exploited by the attacker to execute malicious code in the context of the logged-in user. Even if the flaw was patched in 2017, experts at Microsoft continue to see threat actors exploiting it in the wild. The threat actors deploy multiple backdoors on the target systems. Experts believe the attackers use them to create redundant channels of communication. The information gathered by the experts led them into believing that the goal of the attacks was cyber espionage. The researchers linked the campaigns with a Chinese app group tracked as TA428. Some indirect evidence that links the attacks to a China-linked group is the use of hacking utilities that are popular in China, the use of second-stage CNC server located in China, and the fact that the CNC server registration information includes an email address in the Chinese domain 163.com specified in the administrator's contact data. One of the backdoors used by the group is called PortDoor. It was first detailed by CyberReason researchers in April 2021. CyberReason researchers reported that a China-linked app group targeted the Russian defense contractor Rubin, involved in designing nuclear submarines for the Russian Navy. The PortDoor backdoor implements multiple functionalities, including the ability to do reconnaissance, target profiling, delivery of additional payloads, privilege escalation, process manipulation, static detection, antivirus evasion, 1-byte XOR encryption, AES encrypted data exfiltration. Attackers abused open redirects on the websites of Snapchat and American Express as part of a phishing campaign targeting Microsoft 365 users. The term open URL redirection, open redirects, refers to a security issue that makes it easier for attackers to direct users to malicious resources under the control of the attackers. Open redirect occurs when a website fails to validate user input, allowing attackers to manipulate the URLs of high-reputation domains, Amex, Snapchat, to redirect victims to malicious sites. Victims will trust the link because the first domain name in the manipulated link is a trusted domain like American Express and Snapchat. The trusted domain, for example, American Express and Snapchat, acts as a temporary landing page before the surfer is redirected to a malicious site, reads a post published by Inky. The following example shows an open redirect URL. Surfer sees it's a blah, blah, blah. Let's say americanexpress.com/? Redirect equals blah, blah, blah. The surfer sees the link going to a safe site, which is americanexpress.com or amex.com or snapchat.com or safe.com, but may not realize that this domain will redirect them to a malicious site, which is malicious.com with the redirect, or in this case the URL equals, which may harvest credentials or distribute malware. The experts reported the Snapchat vulnerability to the company through the Open Bug Bounty platform on August 4, 2021, but the issue is yet to be addressed. Unlike Snapchat, American Express quickly fixed the issue being exploited in late July. When examining links, surfers should keep an eye out for URLs that include, for example, URL equals, redirect equals, external link, or proxy. These strings might indicate that a trusted domain could redirect to another site, concludes the report. Recipients of emails with links should also examine them for multiple occurrences of HTTP and blah, blah, blah. If you watched my episode about this specific attack, you'll remember that I said no human being is going to be able to do this. This really needs to be taken over by the browser or some extension or some other business idea that maybe you'll come up with. If the redirection is necessary for commercial reasons, the domain owner should present users with an external redirect disclaimer that requires user clicks before redirecting to the external site. A massive attack hit the website of the German Chambers of Industry and Commerce, forcing the organization to shut down its IT systems as a precautionary measure for security reasons. Due to a possible cyber attack, the DIHK organization has shut down its IT systems as a precautionary measure for security reasons. We are currently working intensely on a solution and defense. The IT systems are successfully started up after testing so that the services are then available again for companies, reads the announcement published by the German Chambers of Industry and Commerce. DIHK states that phone and fax are only channels to use to contact it. Michael Bergman, chief executive of DIHK, defined the attack as a serious and massive one. It also added that the organization was not able to estimate how long its systems will be down. Bergman did not provide further details about the attack, but the circumstances suggest the German Chambers of Industry and Commerce was the victim of a ransomware attack. If the shoe fits, right? Researchers warn of a new ransomware called GwisinLocker, which is able to encrypt Windows and Linux ESXi servers. The ransomware targets South Korean healthcare, industrial, and pharmaceutical companies. Its name comes from the name of the author Gwizin, ghost in Korean. The ransomware is distributed through targeted attacks against specific organizations. Experts also reported that the names of South Korean entities such as the Korean Police, the National Intelligence Service, and KISA are listed on the ransom note. It is similar to Magnaber in that it operates in the MSI installer form. Yet, unlike Magnaber, which targets random individuals, Gwisen does not perform malicious behaviors on its own, requiring a special value for the execution argument. The value is used as key information to run the DLL file included in the MSI. Reads the report published by security firm Anlab. As such, the file alone does not perform ransomware activities on security products of various sandbox environments, making it difficult to detect Gwisen. The ransomware's internal DLL operates by being injected into a normal Windows process. The process is different for each infected company. The GwisinLocker ransomware is able to operate in safe mode. It first copies itself to a certain path of program data and then is registered as a service before forcing a system reboot. Researchers from Reversing Labs analyzed the Linux version of the ransomware. They pointed out that it is a sophisticated piece of malware with features especially designed to manage Linux hosts and targets VMware ESXi virtual machines. GwisinLocker combines AES symmetric key encryption with SHA-256 hashing. It generated a unique key for each file. Analysis and public reporting of the larger GwisinLocker campaign suggests the ransomware is in the hands of sophisticated threat actors who gain access to and control over target environments prior to the deployment of the ransomware. That includes identifying and stealing sensitive data for use in so-called double extortion campaigns, concludes the report published by Reversing Labs. Details in samples of the group's ransom notes suggest a familiarity with the Korean language as well as South Korean government and law enforcement. This has led to speculation that Gwisen may be a North Korean-linked advanced persistent threat group. An automotive supplier had its systems breached and files encrypted by 3 different ransomware gangs over 2 weeks in May. 2 of the attacks happening within just 2 hours. The attacks followed an initial breach of the company's systems by a likely initial access broker in December 2021, who exploited a firewall misconfiguration to breach the domain controller server using a remote desktop protocol connection. While dual ransomware attacks are increasingly common, this is the first incident we've seen where 3 separate ransomware actors use the same point of entry to attack a single organization, Sophos X-Ops incident responders said in a report published Wednesday. After the initial compromise, Lockbit, Hive, and Alpha Black Cat affiliates also gained access to the victim's network on April 20th, May 1st, and May 15th, respectively. On May 1st, Lockbit and Hive ransomware payloads were distributed across the network using the legitimate PS Execute and PDQ deploy tools within 2 hours to encrypt more than a dozen systems during each attack. Because the Hive attack started 2 hours after Lockbit, the Lockbit ransomware was still running, so both groups kept finding files without the extension signifying that they were encrypted. Sophos X-Ops added. 2 weeks later, on May 15th, while the Automotive supplier's IT team was still restoring systems, a Black Cat threat actor was also connected to the same management server compromised by Lockbit and Hive. After installing the legitimate Atera agent remote access solution, they gained persistence on the network and exfiltrated stolen data. Within half an hour, the Black Hat affiliate delivered its own ransomware payloads on the network using PS Execute and to encrypt 6 machines after moving laterally through the network using compromised credentials. By deleting shadow copies and clearing out the Windows event logs on the compromised systems, this last attacker also complicated recovery attempts and the Sophos team's incident response efforts. The Black Hat affiliate erased evidence that Sophos could have used to retrace the 3 ransomware gangs' activity while in the victim's network. Sophos' incident responders assisting the victim with the attack investigation in mid-May found files encrypted 3 times with Lockbit, Hive, and Black Hat ransomware, as well as 3 different ransomware notes and unencrypted systems. In fact, as shown in the screenshot within the article, some files had even been encrypted 5 times, the Sophos team said. Because the Hive attack started 2 hours after Lockbit, the Lockbit ransomware was still running, so both groups kept finding files without the extension signifying that they were encrypted. Sophos also published a white paper sharing guidance on defending against similar attacks from multiple ransomware gangs. Organizations are advised to keep their systems up to date and investigate their environments for backdoors or vulnerabilities introduced by threat actors as a failsafe to regain access to the network if they are evicted. Sophos also recommends locking down services like VNC and RDP or remote access solutions accessible from the outside. They should be reachable via a VPN and only via accounts with enforced multi-factor authentication and strong passwords if remote access is needed. Checkpoint researchers have discovered 10 malicious packages on the Python package index, or PyPI. The packages install evil stealers that allow threat actors to steal the private data and personal credentials of the developers. The researchers provide details about the malicious packages. ASCII to text is a malicious package that mimics the popular ART package. by name and description, the code on the init.py file downloads and executes a malicious script that searches for local passwords and uploads them using a Discord webhook. There's PyGutils, PyMox, and PyProto2 that are malicious packages that allow attackers to steal users' AWS credentials. Then there's FreeNetVPN and FreeNetVPN2 are malicious packages developed to target environment variables. TestAsync downloads and executes malicious payloads. ZLiveSource downloads and executes malicious payloads. FreeNetVPN and FreeNetVPN2 are malicious packages that target environment variables. We already saw that one. WinRPC exploit, a malicious package that steals users' credentials as part of its setup.py installation script. There's BrowserDiv is able to steal the installer's credentials by collecting and sending them to a predefined Discord webhook. Unfortunately, in recent months, many other malicious packages have been found on the official PyPI repository. In June 2022, Sonatype researchers discovered multiple Python packages in the official PyPI repository that had been developed to steal secrets, i.e. AWS credentials and environment variables, and also upload these to a publicly exposed endpoint. Supply chain attacks are designed to exploit trust relationships between an organization and external parties. These relationships could include partnerships, vendor relationships, or use of third-party software. Cyber threat actors will compromise one organization and then move up the supply chain, taking advantage of these trusted relationships to gain access to other organizations' environments, concludes the report. Such attacks became more frequent and grew in impact in recent years. Therefore, it is essential developers make sure they are keeping their actions safe, double-checking every software ingredient in use, and especially such that are being downloaded from different repositories, especially ones which were not self-created. We now move on to other security news. An authentication bypass affecting Zimbra Collaboration Suite tracked to CVE 2022-27925 is actively exploited to hack ZCS email servers worldwide. Zimbra is an email and collaboration platform used by more than 200,000 businesses from over 140 countries. On August 11th, CISA has added 2 new vulnerabilities to its Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog based on evidence of active exploitation. The 2 issues are CVE 2022-27925, Zimbra Collaboration Arbitrary File Upload Vulnerability. Zimbra Collaboration contains a flaw in the mbox import functionality, allowing an authenticated attacker to upload arbitrary files to perform remote code execution. This vulnerability was chained with CVE 2022-37042, which allows for unauthenticated remote code execution. Then the second one is CVE 2022-37042, Zimbra Collaboration Authentication Bypass Vulnerability. Zimbra Collaboration contains an authentication bypass vulnerability in mailbox import servlet. This vulnerability was chained with CVE 2022-27925, which allows for unauthenticated remote code execution. CISA orders federal agencies to fix both issues by August 25th, 2022. The vendor has already released security updates to address both vulnerabilities. Cybersecurity firm Volexity confirmed that the flaw is actively exploited in attacks in the wild. In July and early August 2022, the company worked on multiple incidents where the organizations had their Zimbra Collaboration Suite email servers compromised. Volexity discovered that threat actors have exploited the CVE 2022-27925 remote code execution vulnerability in these attacks. As each investigation progressed, Volexity found signs of remote exploitation, but no evidence the attackers had the prerequisite authentication administrative sessions needed to exploit it. Further, in most cases, Volexity believed it extremely unlikely the remote attackers would have been able to obtain administrative credentials on the victim's ZCS email servers, reads the advisory published by Volexity. Volexity researchers scanned the internet for compromised Zimbra instances belonging to non-Volexity customers. The security firm identified over 1,000 ZCS instances around the world that were backdoored and compromised. The compromised ZCS installs belongs to a variety of global organizations, including government departments and ministries, military branches, worldwide billionaire businesses, and a significant number of small businesses. The countries with the most compromised instances include the US, Italy, Germany, France, India, Russia, Indonesia, Switzerland, Spain, and Poland. CVE 2022-27925 was originally listed as an RCE exploit requiring authentication. When combined with a separate bug, however, it became an unauthenticated RCE exploit that made remote exploitation trivial. Some organizations may prioritize patching based on the severity of security issues. In this case, the vulnerability was listed as medium, not high or critical, which may have led some organizations to postpone patching. Big mistake. Threat actors are exploiting the vulnerability tracked to CVE 2022-0028 with a CVSS score of 8.6 and Palo Alto Networks devices running the PAN OS to launch reflected application denial of service attacks. The vendor has learned that firewalls from multiple vendors are abused to conduct distributed denial of service attacks, but it did not disclose the name of the impacted companies. Palo Alto Networks recently learned that an attempted reflected denial of service attack was identified by a service provider. This attempted attack took advantage of susceptible firewalls from multiple vendors, including Palo Alto Networks. We immediately started to root the cause and remediate the issue, reads the advisory published by Palo Alto Networks. Exploitation of this issue does not impact the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of our products. The root cause of the issue affecting the Palo Alto Network devices is a misconfiguration in the PAN OS URL filtering policy that allows a network-based attacker to conduct reflected and amplified TCP DOS attacks. The DOS attack would appear to originate from a Palo Alto Networks PA series hardware, VM series, and CN series firewall against a target chosen by the attackers. The issue could be exploited if the firewall configuration has a URL filtering profile with one or more blocked categories assigned to a security rule with a source zone that has an external-facing network interface. The flaw can be mitigated by removing the URL filtering policy. The company also recommends enabling only one security feature between packet-based attack protection and flood protection on their Palo Alto device. If exploited, this flaw would not impact the confidential integrity or availability of Palo Alto Networks products. We said that already. However, the company pointed out that the resulting denial of service attack may allow threat actors to hide their identity and impact the firewall as the source of attack. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency also published a security advisory to warn of this vulnerability. Palo Alto Networks has released a security update to address a vulnerability in the PAN OS firewall configurations. A remote attacker could exploit this vulnerability to conduct a reflected denial of service, reads the advisory published by CSA. Abouamo was charged with acting as a foreign agent on U.S. soil. He also provided falsified records to feds to interfere with their investigation. The man also deleted certain information from the social media platform in some cases. He shut down the Twitter accounts at the request of Saudi government officials. Of course, he was also able to unmask the identities of some users on behalf of the Saudi Arabian government. Saudi officials paid up to $300,000 to Abouamo for his work. The indictment explained that it was possible by masquerading the payments with fake invoices. The document also states that the man received a Hublot Unico Big Bang King gold ceramic watch. According to an indictment, Abouamo lied to FBI agents, saying the watch was a replica costing $500 and that the last $100,000 wire from Al-Asakir was for legitimate freelance consulting work. In December 2021, security teams scrambled to find Log4j vulnerable assets and patch them. 8 months later, many global 2,000 firms are still fighting to mitigate the digital assets and business risks associated with Log4j. The ease of Log4j vulnerability exploitation, coupled with the critical nature of the bug, which allows attackers to run arbitrary code inside cloud and company networks, is driving a business risk imperative to find vulnerable assets and patch them fast. An examination by Psycognito of large enterprise external attack surfaces found 70% of firms that previously addressed Log4j in their attack surface are still struggling to patch Log4j vulnerable assets and prevent new instances of Log4j from resurfacing within their IT stack. The research highlights business continuity risks such as digital asset sprawl, subsidiary risk, and the importance of reducing the time it takes to identify a vulnerable Log4j asset and patch it. On December 9, 2021, the Log4j critical vulnerability was first identified and was assigned a severity rating of 10 out of 10. It is a remote code execution class flaw found in the Apache Log4j library. This Log4j vulnerability is considered extremely dangerous because it is easy to exploit, and soon after its discovery, a public proof of concept became available. A July report by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security stated the Log4j event is not over. Log4j remains deeply embedded in systems, and even within the short period available for our review, community stakeholders have identified new compromises, new threat actors, and new learnings. Incidents of vulnerable Log4j assets discovered by Psycognito platform are based on simulated adversarial scans of exposed assets in the wild. These instances of Log4j, now mitigated, represented briefly exposed assets that, if overlooked, could have allowed an attacker to access to the cloud or on-premise assets and networks of these organizations. A Psycognito analyst of why companies are struggling to squelch Log4j vulnerabilities once and for all are multifold. First, Organizations have underestimated the deep-rooted prevalence of Log4j software, and software vendors have not yet rid their products of the vulnerable Log4j code. The battle to mitigate Log4j vulnerable assets is exacerbated by new instances of exploitable Log4j being introduced to an attack surface. Further driving this trend is attack surface sprawl, subsidiary and business unit risk, mergers and acquisitions, and a lag in the time to remediate vulnerabilities known as mean time to remediate. Psycognito found that among Global 2000 companies, M&A activity is growing or shrinking, and organizations attack surface by 5.5% each month. Organizations were initially unaware of 10 to 30% of their subsidiaries, according to corporate Psycognito research published in June. The global consultancy Bain & Company reports that M&A activity in 2022 is likely to reach US $4.7 trillion in deal value, making it the second largest year on record. That kind of business change, combined with emergent risks and poor IT ecosystem visibility, make it extremely difficult for security and IT managers to have a 360-degree view of their entire external attack surface. This increases the odds of security gaps in their attack surface going unseen, opening them up to dangerous and preventable risks such as Log4j. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency has added a recently disclosed security flaw tracked to CVE 2022-30333 with a CVSS score of 7.5 in the UnRAR utility to its Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog. The CVE 2022-30333 flaw is a path traversal vulnerability that resides in the Unix versions of UnRAR. The issue can be triggered by tricking victims into extracting a maliciously crafted RAR archive. The vulnerability was reported in late June by cybersecurity researcher Simon Scannell from SonarSource. According to Binding Operation Directive 2201, reducing the significant risk of known exploited vulnerabilities, FCEB agencies have to address the identified vulnerabilities by the due date to protect their networks against attacks exploiting the flaws in the catalog. Experts recommend also private organizations review the catalog and address the vulnerabilities in their infrastructure. RARLab UnRAR on Linux and Unix contains a directory traversal vulnerability, allowing an attacker to write to files during an extract or unpack operation, reads the announcement published by CISA. CISA also added the recently patched CVE 2022-34713 remote code execution vulnerability flaw to the catalog. The vulnerability resides in the Microsoft Windows Support Diagnostic tool. The flaw has been exploited by threat actors in the wild. An attacker can trigger the flaw by tricking the victims into opening specially crafted files. This bug also allows code execution when MSDT is called using the URL protocol from a calling application, typically Microsoft Word. There is an element of social engineering to this, as a threat actor would need to convince a user to click a link or open a document, reads a description provided by ZDI. It's not clear if this vulnerability is the result of a failed patch or something new. The U.S. State Department announced a $10 million reward for information on 5 prominent members of the Conti ransomware gang. The government will also reward people that will provide details about Conti and its affiliated groups, TrickBot and Wizard Spider. The reward is covered by the Rewards of Justice program operated by the U.S. Department of State, which offers rewards for information related to threats to homeland security. According to Wired, which first reported the announcement, the State Department is looking for the members' physical locations and vacation and travel plans. Today marks the first time that the U.S. government has publicly identified a Conti operative, says a State Department official who asked not to be named and did not provide any more information about the target's identity beyond the picture. That photo is the first time the U.S. government has ever identified a malicious actor associated with Conti. The other members of the Conti gang for which the U.S. government is offering a reward are referred to as Tramp, Dandis, Professor, and Reshav. In February, a Ukrainian researcher leaked 60,694 internal chat messages, or 60,694 internal chat messages belonging to the Conti ransomware operation after the announcement of the group of its support to Russia. The leaked files reveal that some high-level members of the gang have connections to Russian intelligence. The Rewards of Justice program also offer rewards for information on other threat actors, including our evil ransomware gang, DarkSide gang, the Evil Corp, and the North Korea APT groups. Kaspersky linked with medium confidence the Maui ransomware operation to the North Korea-backed APT group Andariel, which is considered a division of the Lazarus APT group. North Korean nation-state actors used Maui ransomware to encrypt servers providing healthcare services, including electronic healthcare, health record services, diagnostic services, imaging services, and intranet services. Kaspersky experts noticed that approximately 10 hours prior to deploying Maui ransomware to the initial target system, the threat actors deployed a variant of the well-known DIHK malware to the target preceded by 3 proxy months earlier. Both malicious codes are recognized as part of Andariel's arsenal. Kaspersky experts discovered that the DIHK variant employed in the attacks against the Japanese, Russian, Indian, and Vietnamese companies has a code similarity of 84% to samples used in cyber espionage campaigns attributed to Andariel APT. In April 2020, the U.S. Departments of State, the Treasury, Homeland Security, and Federal Bureau of Investigation released a joint advisory that is warning organizations about the significant cyber threat posed by the North Korean nation-state actors to the global banking and financial institutions. At the time, the U.S. government also offered a monetary reward of up to $5 million to anyone who can provide information about the activities carried out by the North Korean APT groups. The authorities will also pay for information about past hacking campaigns. In July, the U.S. State Department increased the award to $10 million. People that have information on any individuals associated with the North Korea-linked APT groups such as Andariel, F-38, Blue Narov, Guardians of Peace, Kim Suk-hee, or Lazarus Group, and who are involved in targeting U.S. critical infrastructure in violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act may be eligible for a reward. The U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control has sanctioned the crypto mixer service Tornado Cash used by North Korean-linked Lazarus APT Group. According to OFAC, Tornado Cash was used to launder more than $7 billion worth of virtual currency issued since its creation in 2019. The Lazarus APT Group laundered over $455 million stolen during the largest known virtual currency heist to date. The Tornado Cash was also used to launder more than $96 million of malicious cyber actors' funds derived from the June 24, 2022 Harmony Bridge heist and at least $7.8 million from the recent Nomad crypto heist. Today, Treasury is sanctioning Tornado Cash, a virtual currency mixer that launders the proceedings of cybercrimes, including those committed against victims in the United States, said Undersecretary of the Treasury for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence Brian E. Nelson. Despite public assurances otherwise, Tornado Cash has repeatedly failed to impose effective controls designed to stop it from laundering funds for malicious cyber actors on a regular basis and without basic measures to address its risks. In May, the U.S. Department of Treasury sanctioned another cryptocurrency mixer, Blender.io, which was used by the North Korea-linked Lazarus APT to launder the funds stolen from Axie Infinity's Ronin Bridge. This is the first time ever Treasury is sanctioning a virtual currency mixer. Virtual currency mixers that assist criminals are a threat to U.S. national security. Treasury will continue to investigate the use of mixers for illicit purposes and use its authorities to respond to illicit financing risks in the virtual currency ecosystem, concludes the announcement published by the U.S. Treasury Department. Criminals have increased their use of anonymity-enhancing technologies, including mixers, to help hide the movement of origin of funds. 360netlab researchers recently discovered a new botnet named Orchard that uses Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin account transaction information to generate DGA domain names. Over the past decade or so, small amounts of Bitcoin have been transferred to this wallet on a daily basis for various reasons. So it is variable that change is difficult to predict. So the balance information for this wallet can also be used as DGA input, the researchers said. According to the researchers, this technique is more unpredictable than using the common time-generated DGAs due to the uncertainty of Bitcoin transactions. Because of the uncertainty of Bitcoin transactions, this technique is more unpredictable than using the common time-generated DGAs and thus more difficult to defend against. The researchers discovered 3 versions of this botnet since February 2021. They also noticed that its operators switched programming languages during the same period. All the versions analyzed by the experts' versions support propagation by infecting USB disks. Experts believe Orchard can be spread in other ways. The 3 versions of Orchard basically support the same functionalities, including uploading device and user information, responding to commands, downloading to execute the next stage of the module, infecting USB storage devices. Orchard is a botnet family that uses DGA technology. The latest version is dedicated to mining and has started using more unpredictable information like transaction information of Bitcoin accounts as input to DGA, making detection more difficult. In over a year, Orchard has appeared in 3 different versions, with changes in programming language and DGA implementation, indicating that Orchard is a botnet family that is still active and deserves our vigilance, concludes the report. We expect more variants to emerge subsequently, for which we will continue to keep an eye on, and will continue to disclose new findings. Communications company Twilio disclosed a data breach. Threat actors had access to the data of some of its customers. The attackers accessed company systems using employee credentials obtained through a sophisticated SMS phishing attack. Twilio is an American firm that provides programmable communication tools for making and receiving phone calls, sending and receiving text messages, and performing other communication functions using its web service APIs. The company has more than 5,000 employees in 17 countries, and its revenues in 2021 were $2.84 billion. On August 4, 2022, Twilio became aware of unauthorized access to information related to a limited number of Twilio customer accounts through a sophisticated social engineering attack designed to steal employee credentials. This broad-based attack against our employee base succeeded in fooling some employees into providing their credentials. The attackers then used the stolen credentials to gain access to some of our internal systems, where they were able to access certain customer data. Twilio said over the weekend, that's according to the incident report published by Twilio. The company employees receiving phishing messages impersonating the IT department. The content of the messages informed the recipient that their passwords had expired, or that their passwords were scheduled, their schedule had changed, and urged them to log into a URL the attacker controls. The URLs in the message included words like Twilio, Okta, and SSO in the attempt to trick users into clicking on a link, redirecting them to a landing page that impersonated Twilio's sign-in page. The text messages originated from U.S. carrier networks. Twilio reported that it is aware of similar attacks that hit other companies. For this reason, it has coordinated its response to the threat actors with these other victims. As the threat actors were able to access a limited number of accounts' data, we have been notifying the affected customers on an individual basis with the details. If you're not contacted by Twilio, then it means we have no evidence that your account was impacted by this attack, concludes the report. The Twilio Security Incident Response Team will post additional updates here if there are any changes. Also note that Twilio will never ask you for your password or ask you to provide two-factor authentication information anywhere other than through the Twilio.com portal. Tutanota is an end-to-end encrypted email app and a freemium secure email service. As of March 2017, Tutanota's owners claimed to have over 2 million users. The news is that Microsoft is actively blocking Tutanota email addresses for registering a Microsoft Teams account. Microsoft doesn't recognize the company as an email service, but as a corporate address. The first time that a Tutanota user registered a Teams account, its domain was recognized as a corporation. For this reason, any other users of the popular email service were not able to register as an account and were requested to contact their admin. We repeatedly tried to solve the issue with Microsoft, but unfortunately, our request was ignored, says Matthias Fau, co-founder of Tutanota. Microsoft would only have to change the settings that Tutanota was an email service so that everyone can register an individual account, but Microsoft, say such a change is not possible. The head of the Greek intelligence told a parliamentary committee that they had spied on a journalist with surveillance malware. Reuters reported citing 2 sources present. The revelation comes while media and journalists are putting pressure on the government to reveal the use of surveillance software. The committee was called after the leader of the socialist opposition PASOK party, Nicholas Androulakis, claimed authorities attempted to install surveillance software on his mobile device. The practice of using surveillance malware to spy on journalists and politicians emerged in several European countries. At the July 29th hearing, Panagiotis Kontolion, chief of the EYP intelligence service, told the Parliament's Institutions and Transparency Committee that his service had spied on Thanasis Kaukakis, a financial journalist who works for CNN Greece. 2 lawmakers present at the hearing told Reuters. According to Reuters. He admitted the surveillance absolutely. One of the lawmakers present at the hearing told Reuters on Wednesday. Slack announced that it is resetting passwords for about 0.5% of its users after a bug exposed salted password hashes when creating or revoking shared invitation links for workspaces. This issue was reported by an independent security researcher and disclosed to Slack on July 17, 2022. The company states that the bug affects all users who created or revoked shared invitation links between April 17th and July 17th. When a user performed either of these actions, Slack transmitted a hashed version of their password to other workspace members. This hashed password was not visible to any Slack clients. Discovering it required actively monitoring encrypted network traffic coming from Slack servers, reads the advisory published by Slack. Upon receiving the report for the security research, from the security researcher, the company immediately addressed the flaw and investigated its potential impact on users. Slack pointed out that it doesn't believe that anyone has obtained plaintext passwords exploiting this issue. The company also added that it is practically unfeasible to derive a password from the associated hash, and exposed hashes cannot be used to authenticate. All active accounts requiring a password reset are being notified directly with instructions. For information on password resets at any time, visit our help center, concludes the advisory. We recommend that all users use 2-factor authentication, ensure that their computer software and antivirus software are up to date, create new unique passwords for every service that they use, and use a password manager. The bug is said to have impacted all users who created or revoked shared invitation links between April 17th and July 17th, when it was alerted to the issue by an unnamed independent security researcher. It's worth pointing out that the hash passwords were not visible to any Slack clients. We already said that, but it's worth pointing it out again, meaning access to the information necessitated active monitoring of the encrypted network traffic originating from Slack's servers. Security analysts have found security issues in the payment system present on Xiaomi smartphones that rely on MediaTek chips, providing the trusted execution environment that is responsible for signing transactions. Attackers could exploit the weakness to sign fake payment packages using a third-party unprivileged application. The implications of such an attack would be to make the payment service unavailable or to sign transactions from the user's mobile wallet to the threat actor's account. Considering how common mobile payments and Xiaomi phones are, especially in Asian markets, the money pool hackers could tap into is estimated to be in the billions of US dollars. Xiaomi phones that run on a MediaTek chip use the Kinibi TEE architecture, which creates a separate virtual enclave for storing security keys required for signing transactions. This space is designed for running trusted apps like Xiaomi's DIHK, which is responsible for security management, including the Tencent Soter embedded mobile payment framework that provides an API for third-party apps to integrate payment capabilities. Security researchers at Checkpoint have found a flaw in the trusted app format that Xiaomi uses, namely the lack of version control. This opens the door for a downgrade attack, meaning that a threat actor could replace a newer, more secure app with an older, vulnerable version. The researchers were able to use another vulnerability, CVE 2020-14125, in the Tencent Soter trusted app that allows an attacker to extract private keys and sign fake payment packages in the context of an unprivileged user. They bypass Xiaomi and MediaTek security patches by overriding the DIHK app of MIUI 12.5.6.0 with that of 10.4.1.0, opening up a host of exploitation possibilities. The communication link is established by using the Soter service as a proxy. After invoking the initSci function in the Soter app using a Java code that they listed. And that's it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe if you haven't already, and smash the bell if you haven't already. And I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.